Today we're going to cover very quickly how to beat the new D2 dungeon, Warlord's Ruin. First, you need to go and pick up the quest from Ikora Ray at the tower, and then to launch the dungeon, simply click the node on the far right in the EDZ. Right when you drop into the dungeon, you'll have a short little jumping puzzle where you need to scale a large mountain. Try to keep your eyes peeled for red flags waving in the wind. Ironically, red flags are a good thing here. Follow them when you can to make your way up the mountain. Along the way up the mountain, there may be a loot chest. If you see any loot chest in this raid periodically glowing blue, that means the chest is a trap and should not be opened. If you're running the dungeon with a friend who has never done it before, it is important to not tell them this so they can open the chest and you will laugh. Opening any periodically glowing blue chest will spawn in multiple screebs and give you no loot. Again, it is a bait. When you've finished scaling the mountain, you should arrive at the first real encounter, a Scorn boss fight. The goal is to make the boss not immune to damage and kill him. Here is how you do that. Occasionally, during the boss fight, you will see the boss drop small iron lanterns on the ground with a small taken blight in the middle of those lanterns, and the whole thing is going to be surrounded by a white circle on the floor. It should look exactly like this. You'll also see text on your HUD that says imminent wish with a timer counting down. The goal is to stand inside the white circle until the small taken blight within the lantern goes away and is replaced with a glowing bluish light in the lamp. In the footage of the first boss fight, you may see me shooting the small blight because we assumed they needed to be shot and damaged. But again, they don't. You simply have to stand in the circle until the small blight in the lamp goes away and turns bluish. Then the lantern has officially been activated. You have until the imminent wish timer reaches 0 to activate as many of these lanterns as you can. When the timer reaches 0 and you've activated at least one lantern, you will see text on your HUD that says Rathel's Hex backfires. That means damage phase has now begun. The more Scorn lanterns you've activated, the longer your DPS window. Damage the boss as much as you can until you can't anymore, rinse and repeat. Quick note, during the fight, you will occasionally be teleported all the way up in the air, trapped in a giant iron stripper cage. When that happens, simply find and shoot all the taken eyes surrounding your cage in order to free yourself. Take note though, sometimes the taken eyes are above your cage and difficult to shoot. I recommend shooting the eyes around your teammates' cage to help free them and vice versa. Keep triggering the lanterns and damaging the boss until he is dead. When the first boss is dead, you will shortly be teleported into a jail cell where you're basically trapped. The goal, obviously, is to get out. Here's how to do that. As you look around your jail cell, you are looking for two objects that should look like this. ADSing with certain weapons, maybe with a thermal scope, will make them easier to find as they may glow with a red outline. Each member of your fire team should be able to see and shoot two unique objects like these from their jail cell, meaning that there are 6 in total. Shooting the object will make it spin in one direction. Shooting it again will stop the spinning, and shooting it again will make it spin in the opposite direction. A third member of your team should be able to see and shoot an object on the wall, which we'll call a key, and when shot, that will open your jail cell, but only if the objects are all spinning in the correct direction at the time. What's the right direction? Good question. 2 guardians in a jail cell should notice a nearby skeleton as well as a stone tablet with a large white scratch marks on it. Tally scratch marks, to be exact. The scratch tally marks should add up to the number 6. Whichever direction the skeleton's hand is pointing, that indicates how many objects need to be spinning in that exact direction before the key is shot. For example, in my first playthrough, one skeleton was pointing left with his hand with 1 scratch mark, and the other skeleton had his hand to the right with scratches tallying up to 5. That simply means that one spinning object should be spinning left, and the other 5 should be spinning right. When all objects are spinning in the correct direction, the final teammate shoots the key object on the wall, and the jail cells will open. I've heard the mechanics are slightly different if you're solo, more on that another day. Next up, another maze/jumping puzzle. Again, when going through the maze, any chests that periodically glows blue should not be opened because it is a bait. Of course, be sure to not tell your friends that. Also, don't tell your friends about these spots on the wall, which if you don't jump over, will shoot out spikes and kill you. Go through the maze, it ain't super hard, and when you get back outside, you're now in a position where you kinda need to either fight your way to the finish line or run. Scorn will spawn in and attack you, including a big flying taken meatball who can't be damaged. Again, you can either run to the finish or fight your way there, your choice. Afterwards, head along the cliff to the the right side and be sure to jump into a tiny hole in the side of the wall to continue your journey to the next encounter. Oh yeah, sometimes snow will break away and fall when you step on it. Be sure to stand back and watch your friends fall to their death at least one time. Okay, now we're in the next major encounter. There's one big taken ogre who you have to kill, but before you can damage him, you need to light 4 pillars near him on fire. Here's how to do that. Fight off the trash enemies until you see taken eyes spawning in the air. Shooting and breaking every taken eye will spawn 2 large Scorn mini bosses, one on the left side of the stone wall and one on the far right. Shooting and killing these Scorn mini bosses will drop 2 Scorn lanterns on the ground like back in the first boss fight encounter. Again, activate the lanterns by standing near them until the blight vanishes and is replaced with a small glowing blue light. While this is happening, by the way, you'll notice that the weather is getting really and windy, and there's now a new debuff on your HUD called Biting Cold. If Biting Cold ever reaches ×10, you will die. You can reduce Biting Cold by either standing near the flaming towers near the ogre, but if you're not in damage phase, you should instead reduce Biting Cold by standing near the lit torches on the back stone wall where you begin the fight. There should be multiple lit torches along the wall, so you shouldn't need to look for long before finding one. Depending on how many lanterns you've activated, you will spawn in some glowing fire orbs near the center of the map where you started. Pick up those glowing fire orbs and drop down to the ground where the ogre is in order to dunk them into the nearby pillars to light the pillars. When all 4 pillars have been lit, damage phase now officially begins. It is super important that you all meet up at the final 4th pillar when lighting the 4th pillar. The reason for that is standing near a pillar will use it up during the damage phase. Meaning, if damage phase begins and everyone is standing near a different lit pillar, you are using 3 pillars up at the same time, which you don't want. Ideally, you want to be using only 1 lit pillar at a time. Move from 1 lit pillar to another in a circle, 1 at a time, and when all 4 pillars have been extinguished, damage phase is now over. Rinse and repeat until the ogre is dead. Now you should have your final maze/jumping puzzle before the final boss fight. Eventually, you'll find a room with a bunch of bait chests. One of them is actually real though, so find whichever one is not periodically glowing blue. Because the glow isn't constant, you may have to make like a pervert and stare at some chests for a while to find out which one isn't sometimes glowing blue. After that, keep going and climbing the mountain until you have to turn into the mountain where there will be some taken, scorn, and a big taken blight. That just means you're going in the right direction. Eventually, you will wind up outside again. When in doubt, just keep finding ways to go up. Again, you're trying to reach the peak of the mountain, which you eventually will. Now you should be in the final boss fight, where we combine a lot of the mechanics we've learned up until this point with one new mechanic. Your goal is to kill the taken meatball, who, shocker, is immune, and you have to first make them not immune. Scorn will spawn in, kill them, and be sure to shoot and break the taken blight orbs on the ground so you're not damaged by the blight they cast all over the floor. Eventually, taken eyes will spawn in the air like before, and like before, breaking them will spawn 2 big mini bosses. Also, like before, killing the Scorn mini bosses will drop 2 Scorn lanterns each on the ground. Also, like before, you need to stand near them long enough for the blight inside them to go away. Here's what's different. You'll have a debuff called Hex of Vengeful Corruption on your HUD. If you don't get rid of this by the time the countdown hits 0, you will die. You get rid of that debuff by meleeing a nearby Scorn who is immune to all other forms of damage. Ever played tag as a kid? Same thing. You're tagging the Vengeful Corruption power onto the Scorn and then running away from him so they don't give it back to you. I'm gonna recommend waiting for the timer to get real low before tagging the Scorn. That way you have enough time to activate the Scorn lanterns, and then when they're activated, you can tag the immune Scorn with a melee, give him the debuff, and then you peace out. Like before, when the Imminent Wish timer reaches 0, damage phase now officially begins on the meatball. The more lanterns you've activated before damage phase, the longer your damage phase will be. When damage phase is over, you can now jump to the next highest area up on the map, rinse and repeat. If you reach the highest part of the mountain, there is a brief window where you can damage the boss even further. Unfortunately, during our first playthrough, my team was kind of scattered and dying, and we didn't realize until later that you could damage the meatball at that time, but you can. When that extra damage phase is over, you go back to the lowest platform and start all over again. When you reach the meatball's final window of health, just keep hitting them until they're dead. Dungeon over. At the end of the dungeon, be sure to activate the bones near the chest in front of you to progress the quest, which I didn't do because I was so excited to make this guide. Guess I gotta run it back. Be sure to ring the notification bell because there are secret, weird, taken locked doors all over the dungeon, and as soon as I figure out what they do, probably something with the new exotic, I'll be sure to let you know. Please click the like button on today's video if it helped your team out. Really helps my channel a lot. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.